There's one thing I wanted to touch on before we finish stream today, before I raid it out and before I finished up on what we were talking about. Everyone remembers the 2019 election, right? Now, I criticised this at the time because I thought that the manifesto had too much stuff. It was too full. It seemed like they were promising more than they were giving. Obviously, it didn't really matter at the end of the day in 2019 because in 2019, the real issue was Brexit. Everyone voted based upon Brexit. It doesn't really matter what the manifesto included. People were just going to vote for Brexit anyway. Very frustrating that I didn't care at the time. I still don't care about that now. And I would much rather have properly voted on economic policy. And it was difficult at the time to try and get people to vote in economic policy when they were too busy talking about A, Brexit, and B, talking about however many times the jam man had stood next to Martin McGuinness. Even then, right? One of the policies that they announced at the time was the idea of creating a national broadband service, which obviously was massively pilloried in the press because they are beholden to the shareholders of all of the conglomerates that have a massive monopoly over our broadband network, giving us the excellent service that definitely doesn't make me drop frames when I'm streaming. And this was criticised heavily in the media, including in the state-owned BBC of all places, for being quote-unquote broadband communism. People will be very, very, that's not and open this in a new tab. People probably would have seen this image plenty of times of Rebecca Long Bailey giving an interview on Politics Live, talking about the idea that creating a national broadband service would somehow be communism. Of course it isn't, because communism is when there is no state, there is no money, and the workers control the means of production. And there is no class, obviously, because the workers control the means of production. Now, this policy is a good policy, right? I thought it was too much. I thought it was unlikely to be able to happen. I don't think people were going to believe that it had the possibility to happen. But it is a good policy, and the reason why it's a good policy is because broadband is a natural monopoly, right? It's not something where a startup which has its eyes on the prize can somehow come in and undercut the very large multinational corporations that have the vast monopoly on the infrastructure that is required to be able to get you into the position where you can provide people with lots of broadband, for example. The startup costs are high. In other countries as well, it happens less so here. There is some of that too here. In other countries, it's even worse than it is here. But the broadband companies will cartelize. They will cut up the country into these areas where they refuse to compete because they know that the ability for any startup to enter the market, to challenge them and to undercut them, and to essentially make the most of what the supposed gains of market dynamics are, such that people compete for the lowest price there to be able to get the most consumers. That doesn't happen because startups don't actually compete. The companies themselves cartelize and chop up the country into different areas specifically so they don't have to compete to keep prices high. And of course, they don't have to provide a properly good service because you have very little choice about which broadband provider you even have access to in the first place. It's a system that is fundamentally at odds with market dynamics. For example, this is it's the supply and demand curve is inelastic, and it allows these companies to be able to properly rinse you for every penny that you've got. Most people will be fully aware of this, because they will have seen their broadband prices increase with the retail price index of inflation based upon the new financial year. I had a broadband bill coming back from Virgin Media at £47.50, which was not happy. I wasn't happy about that. I would much rather have had free broadband at the point of use, a national broadband service delivered by the Communist Party of Jeremy Corbyn. But no, unfortunately, I have to deal with extremely high prices for Virgin Media, which is not exactly what we wanted. I'm not frozen 255. I do not have my cam on because I couldn't be asked. So that is me pretending to have a camera. And having a stereotypical picture of me looking incredibly surprised, as I am wont to do, considering the state of normal Ireland at the moment. I shouldn't be surprised by the news that we get, but whatever. Anyway, markets and natural monopolies. The supply-demand curve is inelastic, so it makes no sense to have this as severely marketized as we do at the moment. Right? Especially considering that broadband as a product is not a luxury anymore. Right? It's not a luxury to have broadband. In fact, it's entirely necessary to be able to have access to broadband to be able to properly function in society. How do you apply for a job if you don't have the internet, for example? No one accepts paper CVs anymore. You need to actually email these people through whatever channel they've got, whichever macro they've got that collates all of the information in some access database somewhere, if they've even got the actual infrastructure to be able to take it, for example. And so, yeah, this would have been a really good idea. This would have been good, but I was critical of the policy at the time. But it's very clear to me that one thing that is very difficult to marketize is something like broadband. And would you not know it, right? When the Jam Man says it, it's broadband communism. It's ridiculous. We have the literal state broadcaster undermining the opposition by trying to call a nationalised service communism. It's not even socialism. It's just social democracy. It's a social democratic policy, just like basically everything was being offered by the Jam Man in 2017 and in 2019. It was just social democracy. It was just looking at a market that doesn't function properly and saying, let's demarketize it on the basis of utility rather than ideology. It's why when people like Sir Keith Stonga Casey come up and say to us, well, actually, no, I'm looking at this from a pragmatic perspective, and I don't think it's pragmatic to nationalise this industry. When you look at the state of our waterways, you look at the state of our railways, you look at the state of our energy market, you look at the state of Royal Mail, and you say, look, it's obvious you need to nationalise this stuff on the basis of utility, right? But the real thing is that he actually doesn't want to nationalise this stuff because he doesn't believe these should be nationalised because he's a neoliberal. He's always been a neoliberal. He is a right-wing economically, and he doesn't believe any of this stuff in the first place. Because if he did, he would use his massive advantage to be able to push for these policies that are overwhelmingly popular, right? In fact, this policy was popular at the time. It was very amusing that it was a popular policy that got panned in the press. Some people theoretically could have turned off, although I don't think they did actually turn off Labour because of this policy, even so. And then we went into a pandemic where we were all stuck at home. Right? We were all stuck at home during this period where the one thing that was entirely necessary during the lockdown of the pandemic was to be able to actually get access to the internet so that we could not actually literally go insane, being cooped up and locked up at home for, over 2 years. We were essentially all cooped up at home during the coronavirus pandemic. And so we all needed broadband. So just after the electorate supposedly reject the broadband communism of the Jam Man, suddenly we're at this position where it seems like an excellent idea, and we were having to provide subsidised internet to low-income families anyway for them to be able to properly function in society. Okay, it's a silly system that makes no sense. No sense. And do you know who's realised that this doesn't make any sense? Fucking City AM. Someone from City AM does an article called "We Need to Break Up the Broadband Monopolies or Nationalise Connectivity." I shit you not. They've admitted yet again that the Jam Man was correct. He was correct about free school meals. He was correct about the Northern Ireland Protocol. He was correct about everything that he talked about. And we continually are living in the world in which he was correct. And people keep asking for stuff. There's a cross-party consensus on free school meals at the moment. And this was the one where LBC tweeted out that ridiculous picture of Jeremy Corbyn's free school meals policy saying, is this the nasty face of Corbyn's Labour? And now we have a cross-party consensus amongst MPs from different parties saying we should have free school meals. He was right yet again. He continually gets proven right. And I think slowly but surely the members of the general public are picking this stuff up. But this is City AM, right? This is a paper that continually recommends people vote Conservative. It always has supported the Conservative Party going into elections. It's the paper of literally the financial sector of the city. This guy wrote this article, John Seal, is the director of an IT company. He's not some fucking radical socialist asking for broadband communism. He just knows that it's just the obvious positive utility decision to do in the wake of a broadband system that really doesn't work otherwise. It's safe now to sound a wee bit radical because there's no chance of it happening. Well, in the same way that it's now actually it's actually now acceptable to criticise the Conservative government for acting like they always have done for the last 45 years or whatever it is. Now there's controlled opposition, right? Now there's controlled opposition. These criticisms all start coming out. Now that the threat of any actual change is gone, suddenly everyone realises the Conservatives are shit. Suddenly everyone realises the papers are all client journalists. Suddenly everybody realised that none of the neoliberal policies that continually get shoved down our throats were ever necessary in the first place, right? The internet and broadband connection has become a fourth utility in a market we need to take it just as seriously to protect consumers from rising prices, writes John Seal. I'm going to become the Joker. The great noticing of 2023. Well, we're living in Corbyn's world at the end of the day, right? We are living in the world that he told us was bad, and he's been proven correct at every single turn. Corbyn's main problem is he wasn't left-wing enough. I mean, you and me agree on that. Not in total agreement with JC and everything, but he's been on the right side of history more times than anyone else can think of. Yeah, exactly, 100%, and that's why he had to be destroyed. Because not only was he decided to actually move the Overton window further leftwards than anyone expected there to be any ability to be able to do so, but he also showed everybody, right? He put a mirror up to the establishment class in this country, all the journalists, all of the liberal types who accepted austerity, who accepted the neoliberal narrative around how you manage an economy. He put a mirror up to these people and said, no, it's wrong, it's bad, there's a different and better way. And they realised, unless they destroyed him, and if he became Prime Minister and showed them they were wrong, everyone would know they're all frauds, they're all idiots, they all tacitly accepted the social murder of 300,000 people during the austerity period. The press could not deal with this kind of stuff because it would have shown them how wrong they were, and they could not deal with that. These people are incredibly egotistical, and they can never admit that they're wrong or admit that they're on the wrong side. They believe fundamentally that this liberal centrist bubble they live in is the correct side, right? It's why they will always tell you to vote for Keir Starmer, because they fundamentally believe they are on the correct side of history by supporting the red team in this instance. It's all just fucking team sports to these people. And that's why we literally have people on the current Labour Party on the back of the deliberate sabotaging of the Corbyn campaign from forces both inside the Labour Party and outside the Labour Party. They are now talking exactly like David Cameron did from 2010 to 2016. Unleash the power of the private sector, public-private partnerships, all that kind of fucking shit, right? And literally, as Stephen Flynn on Question Time said, Keir Starmer is just David Cameron in a red tie, and it's true. It's 100% true. But a big part of why they wanted to destroy it was because once people saw that better things were possible, then they won't settle for less, and that's why even 68% of Conservative voters support nationalisation of water. Right? It's a common sense position at this point. I hate to use that phrase, but it's just obvious that the current system does not work. Think about it. If the water stops, how long will it take you to notice? None of the internet, and with the majority of us glued to the phone or computer, you could notice within seconds. Very quickly, the internet has become the fourth utility on par with gas, water, and electricity. Similarly, they all share one thing. Despite there being many recognizable brands who are able to bill you, there is a central nervous system owned and managed by one operator. They are a de facto monopoly business with only the government holding them to account in their cycled price plans. Consequently, providers and consumers are at the behest of any upstream price changes, which, providing wording is correct, they can enforce both within a contract despite the contract terms, as well as putting up the prices for new customers. Unlike our European counterparts, the connectivity infrastructure is monopolised, which is why only 8% of homes in the UK have full fibre broadband compared to 71% in Spain. Connectivity isn't just for social media, it's the backbone of business globally. And that's the thing, even if you're a fucking liberal business pill type person, like apparently some people are, like Yanis Varoufakis loves small businesses, whatever. And you know, in a social democratic economy, small businesses are a good thing. They provide a important foil locally against gigantic corporations who are the real enemy in this situation. And that by having a nationalised broadband service, like they would have had with the quote-unquote broadband communism, you would have been able to properly subsidise an important part of what running a business, small business, is necessary to be able to do. Having access to incredibly fast fibre broadband, what was promised by the manifesto in 2019, would have actually really helped level the playing field between big and small businesses. It really would have done. It would have been wouldn't be a kind of gigantic difference in pace between the two, but it is yet another overhead that would have been taken out of the pocketbooks of small businesses whose margins were already kind of razor thin. And so it's not even a policy that is specifically pro worker. It's just necessary and makes sense no matter what your economy. The lack of competition in the market is to the detriment of connectivity innovation, which in turn impacts business and opportunity. Infrastructure is not being upgraded and improved like electricity, water, and gas distributors, which are also monopolies. The setup is behind the curve and there is a lack of regeneration to improve the network. Again, this guy literally writing in the Conservative paper City AM, literally saying we should nationalise the internet and we should nationalise electricity, water, and gas. We should also go for mail and rail as well. But, like, literally, This is the stuff that we were asked, that we were told was economically illiterate in 2017 and 2019. And now we have someone who's a director of business telling you that it's correct. There's no wonder why all this group of high-profile economists signed the open letter endorsing Corbyn's economic program. Like, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous that we continue having these conversations and continue getting proven right. I'm sick of getting proven right every single time. It's driving me around. I'm gonna have a mental breakdown. I'm gonna have an aneurysm. In the middle of no man's land, these monopoly markets are pulled between the stakeholders of the businesses that service them and the government that attempts to regulate them. And there's a chicken and egg situation with no one wanting to ask the other for more. Therefore, we should either open it out fully to the market so businesses can compete for customers, or nationalise it so the responsibility lies solely with the government. There are pros and cons to both approaches. Either way, we need to get out of the present limbo. If we open up the market, it should naturally drive competition with businesses investing in research and innovation to ramp up connectivity, at the same time making it financially more competitive, except it's still... the startup costs are still really high, so there's no real incentive for them to do that, but I digress. The other route will see the government having to make decisions on upgrading their network, which is also no bad thing. Where it is a new utility and fundamental to economic output of modern life, there will be a vested interest in keeping it fit for purpose. There is no overnight solution. There was called voting for the Labour Party in 2019. But with the general election penciled in for next year, the political parties need to address the lack of infrastructure in the room. I genuinely, I'm like... There was a general election in 2019 where infrastructure was the main economic policy of the opposition, and you literally, this paper that you're writing endorsed the government against the opposition, providing you with literally the things you're asking for in this article. If you could see me, like my expression could like paint 1,000 words. It really could. Or write the painting of my expression could write 1,000 words. It really could. And then there's no mention of Jeremy Corbyn in this entire article. How can you write about broadband communism and not even mention Jeremy Corbyn at any point during it? Like, how? Last month saw the creation of the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, an outward acknowledgement that the future of the country, be it in education, healthcare or business, revolves around new technologies aided by communication and connectivity. Decisions need to be made one way or another to keep businesses online, and the public as well. You're just a human being. How do you relax? I mean, I don't know how I relax. I don't know how I cope. I subject myself to this on a daily basis to entertain all of you. And I guess you probably are as very frustrated as I am reading this kind of stuff. And it's not just that it's useful to override the market as far as this is concerned, but also just in general, I think that being able to take a load off people's backs, they save money, right? If it's free at point of use, which is what was going to be the case with the broadband policy in 2019, it is subsidizing it for everybody. It makes it easier for everyone to be able to get online. It means that there is no people that can never not afford to have broadband. Instead of having silly subsidy schemes where we spend all of this time trying to means test it, just make it free at point of use for literally everyone, put it in control of the state, can keep it getting upgraded. Like, that would have been the best option. But of course we can't have that because that's communism.